Hello and welcome to this lesson on looping through all the files of a folder. So we want to start looking at working with files and folders in VBA, and probably the most common thing you're going to need to do is perform an action on every file within a folder or directory. So that's what we're going to do here. And as an example, I want to copy and paste the data from each file within a folder into one workbook. So I'll end up with one sheet with a big list consolidated from the data from multiple different files. In this case I have 3 files stored in a folder on my desktop. Now I will provide a workbook with all this information that's on screen in there for download, for kind of following through, but in this video I'm actually storing this code in my personal macro workbook. So we haven't spoke about that for a long while on this course, and I thought I'd bring it back as an example. So in my Excel at the moment, I do not have a workbook open. Let me switch to it. No workbook open at the moment. But I'm still able to access the code as in the personal macro workbook. Now if you go to your editor and you do not see your personal macro workbook on the left hand side like I do, then it's not been kind of initiated yet. And for the personal macro workbook to exist, you have to use it at first time. It's a hidden workbook, but it doesn't even exist until it's used for the first time. So popping back to my Excel again, what you would initially do is just have maybe a blank new workbook, or any workbook would do, and start to record a macro. And this macro can do whatever you want. You can just click somewhere that will do and stop the recording. And it doesn't matter what its name is or anything like this. The sole purpose we are using this is to store it in the personal macro workbook so that it gets created that first time. So you'd do that, you'd click OK, you'd do something like just click somewhere, and then you'd stop the recording. And that would be enough to trigger that personal macro workbook. So that I can see I now have a module 2, because I've already got this module working with my brilliant cell selection there. So this is all irrelevant. You can get rid of all this junk and get rid of that module, but it will create your personal macro workbook for that first time you use it. No, I don't want to export it. Okay, back to our macro. I've taken a few steps here to save us time and stop repetition and all this nonsense, and I've created 4 variables. Also gone to the extent of putting some comments in. So that I've got a string variable to store the name of each file that we loop through within the folder. I've also got a string variable to store the directory, like where that folder is. I've got another string variable which I've called first file, which is used for a test further down, which maybe we'll get to when we get there. But it's all about the header inclusion. So I'm putting it on one sheet. For the first file, I'm copying and pasting everything, including headers. And then for any more apart from that first one, no header inclusion. So this is used for a test. Are you the first one? Yes, you are. Bring the headers in. No, you're not. Don't bother then. And now I've got WBK, our workbook, which is the workbook that the data is added to. I don't want to have to be referencing it by its name each time, although I have a variable to use that. So I've got a variable for nice easy reference to that workbook. Okay, so the first thing in our list is a recap really on the previous lesson. Because what we want to do is the user to specify the file directory. And I thought the best way a user could specify it is using a folder picker dialog box. So, we put it underneath these comments, and in a with construct, like I did in the previous video when we looked at the Save As dialog box. We're going to use the file dialog of the application object, and I'm going to use the MSO file dialog folder picker one, so the user can select a folder that they want to loop within. Let's put my end within, and we'll start to do similar stuff, say, to the previous lesson. We'll display a title for it. So the title will be, please select a folder. Now, something new that we're going to do this time is I'm going to use the allow multi-select, the first property in that IntelliSense list there. And I'm going to use this to say false. No, they cannot select multiple items. They can only select one folder in this example. But how awesome a macro is it if you're looping through multiple folders as well? The repetition there is extreme, and what an example of a macro and what they can do to save you time. Okay, we've got to show that dialog box, don't we? So .show, and then we'll have that test where I want to make sure that the user didn't just cancel this box, they have done something with it. So if I've just completely forgot what it's called. Is it selected items? There we go. Oh, just nearly skipped my memory here. .count. How many items have they selected? Multi-select is off, so it's going to have to be 1 or 0. I want to ask, does it equal 0? If it did, tell them that they did not select a folder, and then exit the subroutine. Else, capture the name of the folder they selected in our variable called file directory. Select, you've got to spell all these correctly. Selected items, the first one. Yes, that's all I need. And I'm going to concatenate. I think we've concatenated for a while. Or have we? Maybe it was quite recent. File directory equals the directory they have selected. And I'm going to concatenate a string onto that. I'm going to concatenate the backslash. When selecting directories, you know, and later in this macro, we're going to concatenate the file name onto the end of that to get a full path. But you know, when I select a folder through this folder picker dialog box, it does not bring that backslash, which should be situated in between the folder name and file name. So we're going to concatenate on ourselves, and I better make sure I put in my end if there. And maybe a bit of space for clarity. So, folder picker dialog box. The user will select the folder they want, and that will be captured in the file directory folder along with the backslash for the path. So I've outlined these comments here to make life easier for both you and me, really, with tracking what we're doing at each point. And after that, a new workbook has been created and assigned to a variable for WBK. So this is the one we'll be dumping the file information into. I need to retrieve the name of the first file in that directory. And the way we're going to use this is going to use a VBA function called dir, which I believe stands for directory. Now this brilliant function will go in and retrieve the name of the files from a directory. If you use the dir function and you specified our directory to look within, and we're going to specify file directory, the variable, it will grab the first file name from that list. From then on, if you call the directory function, the dir function, and you do not specify any directory, its job is to get the next file in that folder, which is going to be fantastic for us for our loop. So first of all, I do want the first file name. I'm going to store that in a variable called file name. So I'm going to say file name equals dir opening bracket. Now notice this dir function asks me, can you give me the path name? And it's optional, because next time we use this, we are not going to use it. Because as I say, if you do not specify it, it gets the next file name. Then it asks for attributes. So you can specify, kind of read-only files and kind of system files and stuff like this. Also optional, and in this example, we don't care for. File directory, though, is where it needs to look. And what I'm going to do next up is then assign that file name to my first file. So because this is the name of the first file, I'm also going to assign the name to a variable called first file. So within the loop I can do that check and go, are they equal to each other? If it's the first time you're running, yes they will be, and include headings. If not, don't. So let's scroll down where I have this kind of stuff. Need to create a loop for the files of the folder. We're going for a do loop. We need a way of exiting this, and we can get away with a few different scenarios really. We could use a for loop and use a count for how many files there are and run it for that. I was going to use a do loop, so I was going to say do until, and I was going to say file name, because that's going to be the name of the files that dir will retrieve and pass to as we look through. I'm going to ask if it's equal to an empty string, because when the dir function runs out of file names, it will return an empty string. So if I say do until this, I know when they have run out of file names. Okay, I'm going to move down this list, where I then have to put my end of my loop, which I'm going to put here. So I'm going to put loop. So I've got this message box for the end. All store totals have been added, because in this example, each spreadsheet has some fictional store totals. Each spreadsheet actually has the exact same data in, as it's just an example here. We're not too concerned with it all being different. But that's the scenario. 3 different stores, add all the totals in one list. Okay, got the loop there. Looking back to the comment at the top here, after looping, first thing, open the first file. Okay, so before we do some copy and pasting, it's got to be open. So we're going to say workbooks, because this file is a workbook, dot open. I guess a fairly obvious method there that we were going to use. And then I'm going to need to specify information to it. Loads of information you could potentially specify. Delimiter characters in there and passwords and stuff. All I want is the name of the file, which is the mandatory one, as you can imagine. And I'm going to ask for it to be, no I don't need that, what am I doing? File directory concatenated with file name. So the full file path will be the directory, the name of the folder, C:\/ blah 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 desktop / I think I called it Excel files / the one we put in, name of the file, comment Bonays. Might be Chester. Let's find out. Right, that's open. Now we do the test. Are you the first file in the list? If so, copy and paste it from cell A1 using the cells object there. So it includes the headings and everything else. Yeah, using special cells there to get the end of the list. We saw a few different techniques quite early in this course for copying and pasting and how we can do it. I've gone for a 2-line technique there. Otherwise, go from row 2 so that you exclude the headings. And I'll also need to do things like offset 1 cell down, because you'll be adding it to the bottom of an existing list. Whereas at this point, you're the first one, so go from A1. Lots of cool stuff there. Right, before we end the loop, got to save and close the file. Got to get the next file name. Let's throw in that next file name first. while it's relatively fresh, we're going to say file name, the name of a variable that we'll use it, equals dir. And that is it. No specifying directories this time, because when you just write dir, you'll get the next file name. Pass it to file name, loop back round. Are you empty? No. Okay, in that case, open it up, do a copy paste operation. This one, second time round, get the next file name. Round we go. Are you empty? No, you're not. In we go. And so on until it is. Okay, before that, let's save and close the file. Workbooks dot, actually, let's specify workbook, open in bracket, what workbook? We're gonna, the workbook called file name. Closing bracket, dot close. Do I want to save changes? Yeah, that sounds like a cracking idea. Save changes. True. Yes, could you please save the changes to it? Actually, I'll say that. I'm just copy and pasting out of it. I don't really need the changes, do I? Let's go for that anyway. Let's have a bit of saving. It's a good thing to demonstrate, even if not necessary. Right, I think we are done. So, as a quick recap here, we've got the folder picker dialog box. A good recap on the previous lesson there. For a user to select a file directory, it's then captured in this variable. A workbook was added. The dir function is used with a path name to get the first file name. That file is opened within this do until loop, run out of directories, and then some things happen. Then things can be whatever you need. Here, we're copy and pasting code. That is then saved and closed, that file, and the next file name is retrieved. And around we go to loop through every file within that folder or directory. So, if I was to give this a go, let's F8 through this code. So in we go. Dialog box, folder picker dialog box, dot show. So I'm going to jump to my desktop where I have stored this folder. I will send these files to you, but it will work with any, I call it store sales, that's what I call it. It will work with any files. So I don't know how relevant that will be for me to do. And even if I do so, make sure that you put it in a folder and you put that folder somewhere. Apologies on I'm saying something silly here, but that's what this macro does. If you want to test it out, get that done. Do it with any file. It doesn't have to be the ones I provide. Make them up. Mix it up. Make sure it works. There's my title at the top there. Right, directory specified. Let's turn on this locals window. Locals. Love the locals window. Okay, through we go. I have chose something. So it will concatenate. There we go. C:\users trainee1 desktop store totals / creates a workbook. See the workbook variable liven up. I can also see the workbook appear in my project explorer there, book 3. File name captured. The first file name is Cambridge.xlsx. There's the dir function grabbing the name of the first file. Now it does not open that file or anything, it just gets its name. You will then do things to it. Immediately moves it into this other variable, so they are the same for the first time we go through, and enter the loop. Open it up. Done. I can see it appear on the left. The Cambridge file is open. Are they the same? Yes, they are. So it goes and does that first copy and paste operation. Saves and closes the file. Cambridge disappears. Grabs the next file name. Chester. You can see it's different to first file now. Loops back round. Goes inside. Opens it up. Chester is open. Are you the same? No. So it jumps to the next bit. Awesome. Saves and close. Next file name. It's Hungerford. Next up. In we go. Through we go. Grab the next file name once it's closed. Next file name is an empty string. I only have 3 files in this folder. Empty string. We're going to be exiting this time. Do until file name is empty. Out we come. Message box. Brilliant. All store totals have been added. Let's get back to our spreadsheet. And here it is. 6,000 and something rows it will be, because each file has the same, I think, 2155 rows of data. And there it is, a big concatenated list in a file called Book 3. Following on a previous lesson, I could have gone and kind of saved this file, but I've got an example of saving later in this course, 2 videos time, 2 lessons time. But the user can always take that step now. You know, at some point we'll draw the line in this level of automation. So here we've got our first lesson of working with files and folders. I'm planning on doing a few different examples as we get through these more complex ones maybe. But this is performing a loop on every file within a folder. Hello and welcome to this lesson where we start to look at how we can loop through specific types of files within a folder. And in this example, on this blank spreadsheet in front of me now, I would like to print a list of all the text files within a folder, only the text files. And I want to list certain information about those files, such as its name, the size of the file, and also the date it was last modified. That's what I like to do, and just print a list of them on this sheet. So let's have a look at the VBA code we have at the moment. So getting a head start on this, so we try not to repeat ourselves too much. But to get ourselves up to speed, I have 2 string variables. One to store the folder specified by the user to loop through. The other one to store the file we are currently examining as we loop through them. And next row, which is going to store the row number on the sheet that we're currently printing to. And that is immediately assigned number 2 because row 1 will be headers. So start from number 2, that'll be the first text file if there are any text files. I then have the folder picker dialog box from the previous lesson, an exact replica of that really, apart from the variables called files folder, where I think I called it something different in the previous lesson. Returning the folder selected by the user followed by a backslash concatenated on there. They can only select one folder, a title there, and a test to make sure they at least select something, and then just hit cancel. We then print the headings onto the spreadsheet and turn them bold. So just some standard headings there, and then it's over to us. So I've got some comments to provide what we need here, and the first step is to get the first file within that folder. So we've got our dir function, and it's going to be file to list, because that is the name of the string variable that's going to have the name of that file. That's what we're calling the file in this procedure. Equals dir, opening bracket, files folder. So the name of the folder specified by the user is in a variable called files folder. That is our path, and when you provide the path to the dir function, it will return the first file name in that list. Okay, on we go. Next step is to create a loop so that we can loop through every file in that folder. So do until file to list equals an empty string, because that will mean that we must have run out of files. Well, dir function returns an empty string if we've run out. I'll just put my loop at the bottom there. Flying through that bit pretty quickly, as it's stuff we have done already. Okay, next up is to write the name of the file, the size of the file, and the date it was last modified onto a worksheet. Previous research has told me that dir already returns the file name for me, so that's an easy one. And there's information, there's a file len and a file date time, which will do the other jobs for us. So I'm going to use this indent because we're in a loop, the cells object, saying that the row we are in is called next row, currently number 2, but we will increment that with our counter loop here. Column 1, column A, dot value equals file to list. First thing is the name of the file. I already have that in a string because of the dir function. Let's take a copy of that, because that is pretty close to what we want in the next two for file size and date last modified. They will be columns 2 and 3 respectively, B and C. Whoops, let's change it to 3, shall we? Next up though, file len, open in bracket. So we can use this file len function to return the size of the file in bytes. It wants the path name as a string for this whole file, so that's going to be files folder concatenated with file to list. And then we've got one called file date time that will return the date last modified. Files folder file to list. So them jobs there should get that done. Printed to each of their cells object. Right, next up, move to the next row in the list. That's going to be a next row equals next row plus 1 job. Increment the next row variable by 1. And then dir to return the next file in the list. So file to list equals dir. If you print dir, or if you use a dir function with no arguments, it returns the next one in the turn. It iterates through the files in a directory. Okay, so all that's missing here is at the moment we've got a loop that will list details about every file in that list. But we're interested in only listing the text files. So there's a few approaches we could make here. It's quite a few different ways we can do this, to be fair. What I wanted to utilise is the knowledge that different file types have different extensions. And the extension will be the last thing in the name of that file. And there are some text functions we can use, one of them being write, that I can use to have a look at the last few characters within a string. And I want to use that information. Now there are, as I say, there are so many. There's functions like find, in string, there's various filters we can apply. There are numerous ways of achieving this. I will go for what I believe to be the most logical and hopefully easiest. So, before I just print them into the cells, I'm going to test it. If write, function called write, that would extract the last few characters from a string. For file to list, it asks for the string's file to list, that's the name, comma, and I'm going to say for the last 4 digits of that string is equal to .txt, then that must be a text file. So then, print the name of the file, print the size in bytes, print the date last modified, and increment the row number. If it's not a text file, I don't need them to increment the row number, or I'll end up with a blank row. But in any case, I will need it to return the next file name. So I'm going to put the end diff there, so that only this part of it is conditional, the fact it increments a row number and actually prints details. Whether it is a text file or not, I will need it after that business to capture the next file and loop back round until it runs out. So I've created that section to be conditional, opting for the superb write function here. Alright, let's restore this window so we can see a bit behind it. And I'm going to use the F8 key to step through. So here we go, stepping through. Got locals window at the bottom so I can see next row equals 2. And I'll need to select the folder I want to use. this text files folder. I will provide the text files and everything from that folder for download and use, but please bear in mind that you can use any text file, so please feel free to experiment, dump other text files in there, throw in a Word document or something in a PowerPoint presentation to show that it will not list those. And have a go, see what else we can do with this stuff. That's what it's about. Right, let's F8 through. Captures the details of that folder. Prints information to it. I can see in the background they have now appeared. File name, file size, date last modified. Grab the first file name, and I can see that is Bradford.txt. It is a text file. Loop until it's an empty string. It's not. Are the last four characters? Can I read numbers? Just about. Last four are .txt. In we go. Print the name, Bradford.txt. Print the file len, the bytes. It's that many bytes. And print the date last modified. Got some hashes because the column's not wide enough. Okay, so move to the next row. NDF, get next file name. Around we go. In we go. Where's the next file name? Bristol, so does the business. Boom, boom, boom. Round we go. Next up is an Excel spreadsheet. Customer list.xlsx. So our test will fail. There it goes. Bypass it. Next one. Eastbourne. There are 6 in this list. Kettering, Portsmouth, and finally Sunderland. Use an example again that these are offices or stores. And I want to list all of them that have returned their file as a little mini example. Runs out, and out we go. So there we go. Could have incorporated an auto-fit maybe, but it's not much for me to ask to do that at the end. There's the date and time last modified. Slightly different dates and times there. Job done. We have printed a list of only the text files. So printing a list there, quite a common enough question to get, hence the example. But to be able to loop through all types of files, whether it's because they've got a certain word in their name, or because they're a certain file size, or they were updated within a certain time frame. We've seen things like the file date time to get last modified there. There's so much information that we could adapt and use in different ways. So you may have ways ready to go right now, but experiment. This all improves our VBA experience and tester skills and our ways of thinking like Excel to kind of tackle any problem. Nothing is impossible. Hello and welcome to this lesson, and in this lesson we're going to look at how we can create folders or create directories on the fly during the running of a procedure. We're also going to cover how we can export worksheets or files as a PDF. And the ultimate goal here is that we want to save each one of these 6 worksheets, so every sheet within a book, as a separate PDF into its own folder. A folder that does not currently exist, so we're going to have to create it during the procedure. And we're going to get the user to specify the name of that folder for us. So let's dive into our VBA without further ado. And just as the previous lessons, we have a little bit written out for us already. I have 3 variables, one for the name of the folder that the user will specify, one for the path of the folder. Now for that one, we're just going to put that in as a constant. We're going to type that into our code. So that will be the same every time in this example. And I'm just going to use the desktop for this example. But back at your workplace, you're more likely going to use a shared drive or some kind for this sort of stuff. Just bear in mind that in the previous 2 lessons, we did look at how we can use the folder picker dialog box to get a user to specify a folder. So there would be nothing too difficult about including that in here as well. I'm just opting against it because we've kind of done that a couple of times already. I is going to be our loop through a sheet. Integer, so if I equals 1 to the rest of the worksheets, do this. So we're going to have our export to PDF in the middle here, so we can do it for every sheet in the book. A little message box at the end so the user knows, because they won't see this kind of stuff happening. Okay, so first off, we need to get the name of the folder. A folder that doesn't exist, but we want the user to specify. What I thought we'd do is use that input box. So I'm going to put folder name, the name of our variable, our string variable, equals input box, and I'll put a prompt. Please enter a name for the folder. And I'll put a comma and I'll put a title as well. Enter folder name. So the input box, something we've covered on a previous lesson, good for capturing kind of entered data from a user. We're going to use it to capture the name of a folder. A classic example of an input box use. Now also, as we saw earlier, if somebody just cancels that input box and doesn't actually put a name in there, then we're going to get an empty string returned. So what I want to do is I want to test that the user did not do that. So I'm going to ask, if folder name equals an empty string, then they haven't done anything about this. So what we're going to do is display a message box to the user. So you did not enter a name for the folder. And then exit the subroutine. So if they haven't put a name, that's the end of that really. We need to abort the macro. Okay, so we've captured the name of the folder at this point. Now we need this folder path, which I said we're going to use a constant file. We're just going to type that in right now, the path to, or what will be to my desktop, but for your shared drive or whatnot. And you can copy that from Windows Explorer. Or use the folder picker we used earlier. I'm just going to assign a string for mine. It's going to be C:\users /trainee1, which is my username, /desktop, and I'm going to concatenate onto the end of that folder name, the name of the folder that we literally just captured. I believe that to be correct. Let's hope I don't have a typo in there. So now I've got that, the next step is to make that directory. So the directory doesn't exist yet, so we're going to use a brilliant function called mkdir, make directory. That will just ask us for the folder path as a string, which we have a variable called folder path, which I can use. So create the directory that I have kind of specified up here. That doesn't exist. Well, that bit does, but this bit doesn't exist. So create that for me. So now it does exist. And the next part of our project here is within our worksheet loop. We need to export each sheet as a PDF. So I need to specify each sheet to start with. So I'm going to put worksheets, closing bracket. So something we did earlier when we were kind of looping through these for each next loops, and these four next loops. So I'm using I as an integer, a kind of counter loop, if you will, a collection loop through this. I'm going to say worksheet I. What am I going to put? I'm going to put dot export as fixed format. A tool to export each sheet individually and as a specified format. So when I press spacebar, we're going to have to start putting in some information now. Export as fixed format, and the first format is going to be type. Now the type we want is going to be an Excel type PDF. Now you can always kind of find this stuff out, but different types of data we can export, different formats. We're going for a PDF. Type is Excel type PDF. Comma. Okay, another bit of information I want to provide is going to be the file name. Now I need to provide the full path here. So the full path is going to be folder path, and concatenated to that will be a backslash, and concatenated to that I was going to use the name of the worksheet. So each worksheet's got a name of the kind of office or store in this example that we're exporting as a report. I want to access that information. First of all, I'm going to put in a line continuation character because it looks like I'm about to run out of space there. And I'm going to put worksheets. Got to type that right. I.name. So use the name of each worksheet. So the full folder path, as specified up here. Don't put a backslash because that's not mentioned. And then the name of the sheet. That is the full path to save it as, including the name of the file. Okay, I'm going to put a comma. There's one more argument I want to complete here, which is going to be open after publish. So if you ever saved as PDF before, you get asked that question about whether you want to open it after publish, and I think most people normally say yes. In this case, we're going to say false. I don't want all of these 6 sheets open by the end of it. Once you've created the file, can you close it down for me? Okay, it seems to be happy with that. So I pressed enter, which is good. So start to type out these extras, so do get a little bit concerned. Especially things that you don't do so often. You know, these kind of loops, for each next loops, and these if statements you're going to do regularly. Stuff like this, well, depending on what you're using your procedures for, but probably not so much. So you may need to consult a book or consult this video each time. There's no shame in that. Exactly the same as owning a dictionary at home. There's no shame in that. Nobody could possibly know everything and remember everything, most importantly. But that has now exported these as a PDF. So I think the next logical step is to give this a try. So, just having a quick once over on it. I'm going to go for my play button at the top. I always call it the play button. Run sub user form. And it will ask me, what would you like to call the folder? I'm going to call it Office Sales. I'll put a space in there, I haven't, have I? Let's put a space in there. Office Sales. Let's click OK. Oh, ask me where the heck my printer is. I'm not connected. Let's choose a fax machine. Obviously choose a correct printer at that point, please. And I can see it kind of running through some bits now. All PDFs have been saved. That is good news, seeing that. But we should check this out, really, shouldn't we? Let's open up Windows Explorer. Let's go to my desktop. Office Sales, was it called? Look at the state of this. Office Sales. I've got a folder called Office Sales. Oh, yes. 6 individual PDFs. Let's pop one of them open. Portsmouth.pdf. The name of the sheet. Oh, that looks awesome. So we have our 6 PDFs open. That seems to have worked a dream. But let's try and run it again. Let's try and run sub-user form. And I'm going to specify Office Sales again. And just want to check that is one space there. Okay, yeah, it is. And now I've got an error, a runtime error. Can't access it. That folder already exists. So working on the idea that you may do this export on a kind of monthly basis or weekly basis. Somebody may have already done it before you. So we want to put in an error handler to check that the folder doesn't already exist before we run it. Now, as you might have guessed, I'm trying to use this folder as well to recap on quite a few things that we've done throughout this course. Now, we're coming to the closing sections now, just a few more to go. And we're seeing the input box, we're seeing error handlers, and hopefully getting quite proficient at it. We've got a runtime error 75. I have that runtime error number. So, don't know why I'm hitting debug there. The plan is that we know the issue is creating this directory. And in fact, when I did hit debug, it highlighted that. I don't know if you took note. So, just before that, I'm going to put on error handler, go to the error handler. Getting ahead of myself. So I'm going to call this, hopefully you've looked at the error handling part of this course. I'm going to go to the error handler section on error. And straight after make directory, I'm going to say on error, go to 0 to disable that error handler. And I'm going to shoot to the bottom of my file, stick in an exit sub before I create the error handler, because I wouldn't want this error handler to always run after message box. That would kind of come out of that. And afterwards we're going to create it. So error handler colon, spell these things correctly. And then we'll create the error handler. I was going to say, if dot number equals 75, then, so that was runtime error 75. If the error you receive is number 75, then that folder already exists. So MSG box, that folder already exists. Exists. Please try a different folder name. Let's go for that kind of description. And then we're going to exit sub. You know, I could re-divert them back to the input box to type one in, but let's exit the sub because I don't want this continuous loop that they get kind of like stuck in. You know, I'm gonna, they might not want to run it again. They might have to consult something first. So let's abort the macro. They can come back to it easily enough. Right, let's give this a run. F5 could do that too. Office sales, nearly forgot what I called it then. Office sales, let's okay that. That folder already exists. Brilliant. So here we have a procedure that will create a folder on the fly during the procedure. We've also put in an error handler there as a way of checking that that folder must already exist and kind of taking the course of action about it, in this case exiting the procedure. But I've also looked at exporting worksheets in this example as another format, and I've opted for a PDF format for its brilliance in kind of distribution and publishing online, that anybody can open it and it's read only. But I can't create a folder for every single instance, that would be crazy. But adapt these, that this could be the whole workbook, it could be a selected range that you're exporting. And the type could be a text file. Once you've got the nuts and bolts of this, we can adapt them to our needs.